Right. So yesterday, I hope हो गया. So as I said yesterday, we covered up to ISDR, right? And I think we have written the focus area and objectives of ISDR also. लिखा था, ठीक है? So we have to cover the next development and international aspects with respect to disaster management. The next one was Hyogo framework for action for a safer world. Right? We also call it as the Hyogo framework. This was for the period 2005 to 2015. Okay. Held in the city of Kobe in Hyogo region we have done in Japan. I hope you remember, and that in the Kobe city this framework was decided finally. Okay. Now, what were the main action points of this framework or objectives of the framework? We can write down. Right, action points or objectives. So every framework or every measure which has internationally been taken goes on to focus on some aspects, and so did Hyogo. What does it include? First, disaster risk reduction as national and local priority. DRR as disaster risk reduction as national and local priority. Next, identify and monitor disaster risks and enhance EWS, early warning system. Identify and monitor disaster risks. So we had to, as per this, identify which are the various types of risk that we have. What is disaster risk? We have done yesterday, right? So identify the disaster risk and then monitor them, right? Monitor them, and then how do you monitor disaster risks? By early warning systems, and hence focus on the early warning systems. All right. Then, third, building a culture of safety. Building a culture of safety and resilience. Culture of safety and resilience. Culture of safety will take care of what type of vulnerability? Huh? When you build a culture, right? Any culture is, culture का मतलब क्या होता है? How do you behave in a group, right? So if you create a culture in anything, right? So let us say if you create a culture of safety, right? What will it overcome? The culture of safety will help you overcome some vulnerability, which very good. The attitudinal and the लिखा था ना हमने कल. So this will help us in overcoming attitudinal vulnerabilities. ठीक है? Attitudinal vulnerabilities. Next, reducing underlying risk factors. Reducing underlying risk factors. Now, what could be underlying risk factors? Organizational risk or organizational vulnerability, institutional vulnerability, physical vulnerability, economic or material vulnerability. These are the underlying risks, right? If they are not strong, you can't build upon. If you don't have material resource, if your organizational, institutional approach is not right, right? If your physical strength is missing, right? In the buildings, in the structures, in your people. So these are underlying risk. These are not something that could be taken care of in a day. You can't make your population strong in a day. You have to ensure that they are fit. You have to ensure that bylaws are adhered to. Okay, so these are underlying risks, right? Which might not directly look like a risk. You might feel, how does weak population make us, make a disaster worse? But they make because the population might not be able to act or react during a disaster. So उस समय पता चलेगा कि यार ये फिट ही नहीं थे, बेचारे बचा नहीं पाए खुद को. I hope you get this. So these are underlying factors. All right. So we have to strengthen the underlying factors also. Okay. So reduce the underlying risks and then strengthen disaster preparedness. Strengthen disaster preparedness. For, before you write the next word, just help me understand. Where was disaster preparedness in our understanding yesterday? Copy में देखो, mitigation. So mitigation did what? Reduced or first tried to prevent, otherwise reduce. So this is where you are trying to reduce the hazard itself. Then came preparedness. Preparedness helped us in achieving what? We have written. Increase capacity and reduce vulnerability. लिखा है ना कल? Right? Preparedness helps you in that. If you are prepared for a disaster and then a disaster happens, okay, then what? How will it help you? How will your preparedness help you after a disaster? It will help you in the what? सबसे पहला रिकवरी. उसको क्या बोला था हमने? वर्ड लिखा है, हाँ? Rescue and all is part of what? Response, right? So preparedness will ultimately help you in your response. ठीक है? The more you will be prepared, the better will be your response. Simple, right? And that's what the line says. Okay. The strengthen disaster preparedness for effective response. All right. Strengthen disaster preparedness for effective response. These are the 5 objectives of the Hyogo framework. Right? This framework has also come to an end by 2015. Okay. After this came up the 5th international measure. We call them as the Sendai framework for DRR. Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. What is the time frame for this? 2015 to 2030. Okay, so this will continue almost till you will give your exam and get selected and get in the service. उसके बाद अब नया रिस्पॉन्स फ्रेमवर्क आएगा. ठीक है, तो अभी आपके पास 12-13 साल है इस फ्रेमवर्क के साथ. ओके, नाउ डिसाइड कितने साल प्रिपेयर करना है. ठीक है, सो what are the main, you can write the first the priorities of this. What is the priority? So it has mainly 4 priorities. Priorities of this framework. Right? It is trying to prioritize on mainly 4 things. What are they? लिख लो. First is understanding disaster risk. Understanding disaster risk in all its dimensions. Understanding disaster risk in all its dimensions. What are the dimensions of risk? Equation: hazard, vulnerability and capacity. ठीक है, for your own understanding if you intend you can write these words here. उसमें भी लिखा हुआ है the same set of words, right? Understanding the disasters in all its dimensions, which means the hazards, the vulnerabilities, the capacities and knowledge also, right? So you have to have sharing of knowledge so as to reach this, right? Next is strengthening disaster risk governance. Strengthening of disaster risk governance. Okay. Disaster risk governance happens at what all levels? सबसे पहला local level, right? So local level. Then you have, so local will include your district and all, block, district, whatever. That is the first. Then state, then national, and then regional first. मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि डिजास्टर इंडिया में आएगा हम यूएसए से हेल्प मांगेंगे, ठीक है? द डिजास्टर माइट अफेक्ट द रीजन. लेट अस से अ साइक्लोन. So cyclone might affect India and Bangladesh together. Earthquake might affect Pakistan and India together. So first you will do a regional level. ठीक है ना? So regional level will mean, for example, SAARC countries, right? So for SAARC, with SAARC you will try to create a network. Do you get? So this is what your regional, and then global level, right? Some disasters global level, such as tsunami, right? So tsunami could be generated somewhere very farther and then it can affect. Okay, so this is where, or drought. So drought can happen internationally. Africa, India, other countries might simultaneously be affected in a period of year. So we might say, okay, we have to overcome the challenge of droughts, and for that we need to do something. Okay, so this is how your this kind of disaster governance, disaster risk governance has to spread from local. Don't forget regional in that. Don't jump from national directly to global. In between, regional will also come. Okay? And for regional cooperations, these aspects become factors. Let us say if you're writing an answer even in international relations about regional cooperation, so even disaster becomes one of the aspects there, which we generally tend to miss. हम उसको इकोनॉमिक, सोशल, पॉलिटिकल, स्ट्रैटेजिक पे ही छोड़ देते हैं, कल्चरल. बट इवन such events as natural disasters have a effect. Okay, so this is it. Then next, strengthening disaster risk governance, then investing in disaster risk reduction. Investing in disaster risk reduction for increased or improved resilience. Investing in disaster risk reduction for improved resilience. Okay, and lastly, enhancing disaster preparedness. Enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response. Enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, and to, within quotes, build back better. And to build back better, within quotes, during recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. Build back better during recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. Okay, so these were the 4 priorities. Sendai also has 7 global targets. Global targets, right, for the period. What are the targets? We have to write the key terms of the target. Okay, so let us write down. 1. Reduce global disaster mortality. or substantially substantially reduce global disaster mortality by 2030. Second, substantially reduce number of affected people. Substantially reduce number of affected people. Third, reduce direct disaster economic loss. Next, substantially reduce damage to A, critical infrastructure, and B, basic services. Critical infrastructure, A, and B, basic services. What are basic services like? Services such as health, education, right? Health and education related services. Next, increase number of countries with national and local DRR strategies. DRR strategies, disaster risk reduction strategies, by 2020. The period for this is 2020. For all the other, the period is 2030. But for this only, because you can't plan to have a strategy 15 years down the line. Okay, so strategy you should have by 2020, and in the next 10 years, you should try to attain the goals of the strategy. Okay. Then, next, enhance international cooperation. Enhance international cooperation to developing countries. International cooperation to developing countries. And lastly, increase availability of multi-hazard early warning systems and DR information and assessment. DR information and assessment. Okay. So these are the 7 goals of your Sendai, okay, which we intend to attain and which are also reflected, as we have seen yesterday, in the National Disaster Management Plan 2016. I showed you there were 3 aspects which are highlighted in that, right? So which were the 3? One was the Sendai framework, the second was the SDG, and the third was the Paris Agreement. Kal dekha tha na? So that's why you need to know what are your Sendai goals and targets, okay? Priorities and targets. So with this we come to, and this is it. I mean, there is nothing new which has happened with respect to disaster management globally, right? This is the most recent major development. So from there, After the international developments, we come to the national level disaster management related aspects. So within the country, what are the different aspects we have with respect to disaster management? Okay. So first of all, does disaster management, where does disaster management appear in our whole set of documents with respect to governing the country? Right? Do you find disaster management as a subject or anything in the constitution? Is it contingency fund of India for disaster kind of situations? But I'm saying, does the constitution have any provision for disaster management? हाँ, डू यू फाइंड द वर्ड डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट? आपका पॉलिटी हो गया अभी तक, कहीं पे आपने सुना डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट का कोई क्लॉज है? राइट, सो यू राइट डाउन दैट द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन डज नॉट, द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया डज नॉट इंक्लूड disaster management as a subject. The constitution does not include disaster management as a subject in any of the three lists. And hence under the residuary powers of the union list, it falls with the center. As per the residuary power, it falls with the center. Now, various recommendations have been made for including DM in the constitution. Various recommendations have been made to include the disaster management in the constitution. The first was, there are, so 1, 2, 3, you can write number wise, when all it has been recommended. The first was recommended by NCRWC, National Committee to Review the Working of the Constitution. To review, National Commission to review the working of the Constitution, which suggested its inclusion in the concurrent list, which suggested its inclusion in the concurrent list. Then the second was the HPC, High Powered Committee, chaired by Shri J.C. Pant. The High Powered Committee of J.C. Pant. This also recommended the need to include DM in the constitution. Then the third was the second ARC. Right? Second ARC has also recommended its inclusion in the concurrent list. Okay, but as per now, it is still not included. Okay, so this is the status of disaster management in the constitution. Though there have been 3 recommendations, but we have still not been included this in the concurrent list. One. Now, second, the other set of institutional arrangements. Right, so the evolution of institutional arrangements with respect to disaster management. Right. The evolution of institutional arrangements. In this, I'll give you the chronology of how the institutions of disaster management have evolved in the country. Right. So the first is starting from the IDNDR of 1990s, starting with the IDNDR of the 1990s. Starting with the IDNDR of 1990s, a permanent disaster management cell, permanent DM cell was established in the Ministry of Agriculture. Then in 1999, the HPC was set up, high powered committee on disaster management was set up under JC Pant, which gave its recommend. Why was the setup? This was set up in the backdrop of the 1999 super cyclone. Right. So first we had the super cyclone, and then we realized कि हम कुछ कर नहीं रहे. So what does the government do after any major incidents? It sets up a committee. So was this committee formed. Okay, HPC. This HPC, what did it do? It gave its recommendation by 2002. Okay. So it gave the recommendations by 2002, based on which the Disaster Management Act, DM Act 2005, based on which the DM Act of 2005 was passed. Obviously, in which year? 2005. Right. Simultaneously, based on the recommendations of the committee, the disaster management cell of the 1990s, which has till now, or which has by now become a division, disaster management cell of the 1990s, which has by now become a division in the Ministry of Agriculture, was shifted to Ministry of Home Affairs. Which has turned into a division under Ministry of Agriculture, was shifted to Ministry of Home Affairs in the year 2002. Why? Can you think of a reason? First of all, why was it put under Ministry of Agriculture? Yes, floods and droughts were the major disasters, and earlier we used to manage only these two major disasters, right? So flood and drought relief, who will give? The Ministry of Agriculture, and hence the cell was under Ministry of Agriculture. But then later we realized there are other disasters such as cyclones and other, which are not under the ambit of Agriculture Ministry. Agriculture Ministry cyclone में क्या करेगा? ठीक है? So that's where they realized that this has become the home ministry related affair, that this is affair of the home ministry, and hence they shifted it to the Ministry of Home Affairs 2002. And then 2005 we had the Disaster Management Act coming into action. Now, what was the approach till 2005, right, for disaster management? You can write that till 2005, The approach to disaster management included ad hoc committees such as, this is up to 2005, right? Period before 2005. It included ad hoc committees such as Cabinet Committee on Management of Natural Calamities, Cabinet Committee on Management of Natural Calamities for natural disasters. This was for natural disasters. And we also had a similar committee called as Cabinet Committee on Security. Cabinet Committee on Security. So पहला क्या है? Cabinet Committee on Management of Natural Calamities, which is for natural disasters. And second is the Cabinet Committee on Security, which is for man-made disasters. Man-made disasters. Okay, but do you think who will be the members of this? The name itself tells you. Who? The cabinet ministers, right? So this was headed by political representatives, political executive, you can say, right? Now, does the minister go and take action in the field? What will the minister do? He will draw a plan that this has happened, so ye karna hai, right? Who will do it? Huh? The permanent executive or civil servants, right? So who are the civil servants under the ministry? कौन है? Who is the head of civil services in every ministry? In every ministry, I'm saying. The secretary, right? So secretary. And who is the head of civil services in India? The cabinet secretary, right? So there was another committee, right? This was the political one. And the second committee was the National Crisis Management Committee. National Crisis Management Committee, which was a permanent executive committee. Obviously, who should head it? The cabinet secretary. So he is the chairman of this. And for the cabinet committees on management of natural calamity or security, who will be the head? The prime minister. Okay. So here you have the cabinet secretary as the chairman, and then the various secretaries of different ministry were the other members. Crisis management, right? And this body was the main action taking body. Main action taking body at national level every time a disaster took place. Okay. And who will be the coordinating agency for this? Your Ministry of Home Affairs was meant to coordinate all the resources, right? So Ministry of Home Affairs was the major coordinating ministry. Okay? I hope you know Cabinet Secretary does not head any ministry. Okay, na? So obviously the ministry which was to coordinate remained the Ministry of Home Affairs. Right, which included deployment of forces, movement of goods, services, anything, any relief, whatever. So that was done by the Ministry of Home Affairs. But what we need to note here is that this approach Now, do you see any organization in this structure which is there to take care of a disaster? कोई organization है? Any institution is there? Do you see any authority, right, or body which is there in this? Authority in the sense, for example, you have national, authorities on different thing, right? So do you have a authority kind of a structure seen here? दिख रहा है कुछ? नहीं है, क्योंकि it is only committees, right? And committees, as I said, these were ad hoc. ठीक है? Especially the cabinet committees were ad hoc, right? So if the cabinet committee is ad hoc, and let us say if you decide something to do, whom do you pass out that information to? आपके पास अपना तो कोई structure है नहीं. You don't have any organization, you don't have any institutional framework. So whom will you pass it on to? Ministry of Home Affairs. And then you depend completely on Ministry of Home Affairs to take action. And if they do not take action, whom do you go to? You go to the cabinet secretary and ask him, please coordinate. Right? So this kind of a structure was again in itself a ad hoc arrangement. Okay? Ad hoc, you understand? Matlab, it was not a fixed structure. It was an ad hoc structure, and ad hoc structures come into play only once an event takes place. Which means, what kind of approach did we have to disaster management? We have done 2 approaches yesterday. So what is this approach? Post disaster. What do we call it as? Copy में देखो. हाँ, traditional, conventional, but उसके अंदर एक centric approach है. देखो, there's a word I have asked you to highlight. हाँ? Relief centric, right? So this approach was mainly relief centric approach and a post disaster approach. It was mainly a post disaster relief centric approach. Okay? So we waited for disasters to happen, and once a disaster happened, the cabinet committee met. It told the NCMC to take action, the NCMC took action, and then the action was over. Because NCMC has to take action on so many. एक disaster के बाद दूसरा आ गया, दूसरा के बाद तीसरा आ गया. So he has to take action for, and they did not have any structure. So this is when the HPC realized, right, that we cannot have only a post-disaster approach to disaster management. वही काम किया उन्होंने HPC ने, right? Because we were not prepared for the super cyclone 1999. They said, had we been prepared, we would have been able to mitigate the effect. But because we were not prepared, so we were not able to take any major action. Okay? So they said that you need to change the approach itself. We need to change the approach to disaster management. And for that change of approach, you need to create. So which approach do we now shift to? We change to the progressive or the proactive approach to disaster management. And for that, what will it include? It will include the pre-disaster as well as the post-disaster. Now, when you say pre-disaster, it implies that whether a disaster happens or not, but you have the structure to prepare for the disaster to happen, which means it cannot be done by a ad hoc committee. You are saying कि भैया we have to be prepared and we have to continuously prepare whether a disaster happens or not. Right? What will that require? That will require a permanent institutional organizational framework. Yes or no? You need to create a complete structure which will permanently, continuously work on disasters. Okay? And this led to creation of the NDM Act, which had provisions for such organizational institutional structure. Do we get this? Okay. So this is how our new approach to disaster management started with the, where did it start from? Disaster Management Act 2005. It changed our approach to disaster management. Okay. So there could be a question, how was the DM Act 2005 a watershed in India's approach to disaster management? Right? And to what level we have been able to incorporate the Sendai framework, targets and goals? Right? Something like this, if they intend to ask, they can ask you a conceptual question like this also. Okay? So be prepared for such answers, that how did it change? Okay, now let us see what did the NDM Act did with respect to disaster management in India. Right, so let me show you. The structure, and see here, this one. So right, is it visible? Yes. So what does it read? Legal institutional framework. This is the first provision in the country having an institutional framework for disaster management, which created new institutions for disaster management. Right, so this you should somewhere note down that the DM Act created new institutions. This was the first legal framework creating new institutions for disaster management. In the country, as earlier there were no specific such institutions. Okay, so what did the NDM Act say? It created a structure saying that, let us say there is a central level. Abhi samne dekho and try to see what does it say. So at the central level, what it did, it created a new institution called as the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, right? Okay. Now, along with NDMA, so what was the aim of the NDMA and what were the goals? वो भी हम लिख लेंगे, but first let us understand the structure and then I will make you write about them. So NDMA was to become the nodal agency in case of disasters, or it is not was to become, it is the, as per this act, it is the nodal agency every time you have a disaster in the country, which means if a disaster happens, NDMA should come into action and it should, decide the way NCMC and cabinet committee were earlier doing. This is to be headed by the Prime Minister directly. Okay. So the Prime Minister will head and this will replace the CC, MNC, हमने किया था ना, कैबिनेट कमेटी ऑन नेचुरल डिजास्टर, एंड द CCS, उसकी जगह ये बना दिया, नो एडहॉक कंप्लीट अथॉरिटी हेडेड बाय द प्राइम मिनिस्टर. ओके, which will decide what all actions we need to take, proactive and post. Okay, this was to be supported. Obviously the prime minister and the ministers will not go on to take action again, so who will take action? Secretaries, right? So for that they created a secretarial body also, National Executive Committee. Okay, so the National Executive Committee was also created, and who heads it? The HS this time, not the cabinet. This is headed by the Home Secretary. Okay, the Home Secretary is responsible to take action here. Okay, why Home Secretary? Because the disaster management nodal ministry is the Ministry of Home Affairs. ठीक है, तो अब कैबिनेट और होम मिनिस्टर आपस में ना झगड़ जाएं, right? Better make the home minister himself the chair of the NEC. ठीक है, so whatever decision the prime minister and the NDMA tells, the home secretary is responsible, he has to take action. Is that all right? ठीक है, so the MHA was the nodal agency in terms of coordination. Nodal, not agency, nodal ministry. ठीक है, nodal agency was this, executive agency was this, and the nodal ministry was the MHA. Okay, why MHA? MHA because the other structures which were created along with the NDMA was the NDRF. right? National Disaster Response Force, right? So they said that the way we have paramilitary, we have military, we have police, let us also create a force for disaster management, which will only work for disaster management, right? What will we call that force as? The NDRF. Okay? So this was for the first time in the world that you have a specific force only dedicated to disaster management. No other country in the world has a specific force dedicated to disaster management. Why? Why is it so? India is one of the most disaster prone countries in the world. Okay? There are two factors for that. One, the geographical factors. We have all kind of geographical conditions in the country, right? Starting from snow-covered regions to flood regions, to drought regions, to cyclone regions, to tsunami regions, earthquake-prone. Name any disaster and we have it. Okay? If that was not enough, we have neighbors to increase our man-made disaster potential. Okay? Nuclear disaster, biological disaster, chemical disasters. Okay? Industrial action also goes on to increase some of them, such as biological and chemical disasters. Okay? And to top on that, we have the densest population. We have not let any region without people. ठीक है? तो कहीं पे थोड़ा सा भी कुछ हिल जाए तो 150 मर जाते हैं. ठीक है? एक ब्रिज भी गिर गया रेलवे स्टेशन पे तो भी 150-200 निपट जाते हैं. ठीक है? So this is the right? So this is the population related aspect, that we have a very huge population density. I might sound ironical, but ऐसा है यार, अब कंट्री हमारा ऐसा ही है, इतने लोग ही हैं, इंक्लूडिंग मी. यू नेवर नो मैं किस बार निपट जाऊँ. ठीक है? हो सकता है कभी रेलवे ब्रिज पे जाते जाते पता चला मेट्रो या रेलवे का ब्रिज गिरा है. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट क्लास में दूसरे सर आ गए पढ़ाने के लिए. ठीक है? बट थैंकफुली आज लास्ट क्लास है आपका बैच में, तो आपके साथ तो ऐसा मेरे वाला केस में नहीं होगा. ओके? सो एनीवेज, मूविंग बियॉन्ड. सो आई होप यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट why did we decide? Yeah, there.
MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs is going to tell NDMA?
No. NDMA? No. MHA is the coordinating nodal ministry. Now I'll tell you what does this mean. Okay? There is a nodal agency and there is a nodal ministry. I'll tell you why we have a nodal agency and ministry separate. Right? In a moment you will understand. But the NDRF was supposed to be under the NDMA. It is not under Ministry of Home Affairs. NDRF is directly under NDMA. Okay? And then the other body you have one more body. What will the NDRF do? Every time a disaster will take place, they will be deployed. They will go there and they will take actions and they will save the people. Okay? This is what they assume that this group will do. Okay. Now, the second body was the NIDM. Right? Another body created under this was NIDM, National Institute for Disaster Management. This was more of a research and training wing. Right? Research, training and documentation kind of event. So they were supposed to prepare documents, do the research, collect the information and provide the training. National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM. ठीक है? जैसा आपका एग्रीकल्चर में you have the universities, what do? They do the research, they do the training, but they do not act in the field. Okay, so same ways here also you have the NIDM, which will do the research, training, prepare document, policy, सब कुछ ये बनाएंगे. Right? So it will be full of scholars, right? Who will do all this action, NIDM. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the next level. Then you have the second level, state. At the state, it replicated the structure, right? So it said, just like the center, at the state also we should have all these bodies. So what will be the biggest body here? I'll come. What will be the biggest body? The SDMA. Then the executives headed by the, वहाँ पे कौन है? हाँ? Chief Secretary, not cabinet. State में you have Chief Secretary. So Chief Secretary will head it. Okay. Then what will the other bodies be? Here also though it doesn't show here, But here also the SDRF is expected to be there. SDRF, State Disaster Response Force. Okay, State Disaster Response Force. And then at this level they did not propose any NIDM और SIDM, क्योंकि हर एक स्टेट को अपना रिसर्च नहीं करना है. NIDM itself can do the research and help. And the other benefit that the NIDM has, it can pick information from different regions and pick up the best practice. State अपने आप में करेगा तो they might not coordinate, but if NIDM does it, it can coordinate from different regions and do the whole thing. Okay, so this is this thing. Then at the district level, the nodal agency becomes the DMD, Disaster Management Department, right? DMD, which mostly is under the Ministry of Revenue or Revenue Department of the state. Under the Revenue Department of the state, right? DMD, which coordinates. Why? Disaster आए तो सबसे ज़्यादा आपको क्या चाहिए? पैसा. Who will allocate? The Revenue Department, and hence the Revenue Department was the nodal agency to release the revenue in case of a disaster. ठीक है, right? And then from there you come to the level of, अब third level क्या है? The third level will be the district level. You have done at central level, you have done at state level. Third level is district. So at the district level you don't have political executives, right? Because they are representing in the parliament and the state. यहाँ district level पे तो आपका political executive वैसा नहीं होता ना, you have representatives, right? So there the action taking body becomes the district administration. Okay, and district administration is having the equivalent in the form of DDMA, District Disaster Management Authority. So disaster management authorities were envisaged at all the three levels, right? National, state and district. Okay. Now, does the DDMA also require a district disaster response force? मतलब हर एक district में हमें response force बनाना चाहिए. क्या करेंगे वो? पता चला 10 साल तक कोई disaster नहीं आया. ठीक है? So it is illogical to create a, and hence it was not there, not proposed. So there are district level disaster response forces not proposed. All right. So this is the structure, and then below them you have the panchayat and the municipal bodies in the district who are supposed to coordinate with the local community. Okay, so this kind of a structure the Disaster Management Act proposed, and it led to creation of also this structure to some level. What was created out of this? Now, before I tell you what was created, it will be better we write down a few lines about their roles, right? हाँ? NIDM भी NDMA के अंदर आया. देखो ये जितना भी स्ट्रक्चर हमने किया अभी तक वो सबका सब आएगा इसी के अंदर. ठीक है? NIDM, NEC, DDMA यहाँ तक. Let me rub that and draw it again for you. So whatever falls under the blue kind of a thing will be under this whole thing is the new structure. NIDM, NDRF, SDMA, DDMA, NDMA and your NEC and SEC. These are all new structures, right? None of them are old. They are all created by the Act and they are all to fall under the NDMA. Okay. Coordination can be done by other bodies also, but they are new structures. Whereas MHA, DMD, district administration, state and government, they were pre-existing. ठीक है ना? The red ones were pre-existing. All these bodies. Only the ones which are in that box were created by the Act. SDMA का फुल फॉर्म हेड कौन होना चाहिए? उसका प्राइम मिनिस्टर है तो चीफ मिनिस्टर. और DDMA का डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट. ठीक है, दिस इज द स्ट्रक्चर. So let us write about them slightly, one line for all of them. Okay, and so what is the NDMA? बोलो बोलो, अंतर क्या है? The red ones were already existing before the act, right? And only the one which is in the enclosed area were the ones created exclusively by NDM Act 2005. Act ने बस यही बनाया है. ठीक है, कोऑर्डिनेशन हो सकता है, दैट्स ओके. प्री एग्जिस्टिंग एंड न्यू coordination might be there. Okay, now let us write about them. First is NDMA. What does the NDMA do? So it is the apex body under the PM. Apex body under PM. I will cut grammar from the statements, you add wherever you want. Okay, apex body under PM. Responsibilities: A, laying down policy, plans and guidelines. Laying down policies, plans and guidelines for DM. And B, coordinating their enforcement and implementation. Coordinating their enforcement and implementation throughout the country. C, approve national plans. Approve national plans. D, general superintendents, direction, general superintendent, direction and control of the NDRF. Okay, so these are the role of the NDMA. Then NEC. What is the role of NEC? This was the question asked in 2010. I have shown you yesterday. देखा था? What are the functions of the NEC? Okay, so what are the functions you can write briefly? Assist NDMA. Assist NDMA. Functions of NEC. Assist NDMA in discharge of its functions. Assist NDMA in discharge of its function. 2 or B, ensure compliance of directions of central government. Ensure compliance of directions of central government. Responsible to prepare national plan. Coordinate and monitor implementation of national policy. Coordinate and monitor implementation of national policy and guidelines. National policies and guidelines issued by NDMA. Right, what is the role of MHA? Third, MHA. overall responsibility of DM. The overall responsibility of DM. Right? But for specific disasters, concerned ministries have nodal responsibility. Specific disasters, concerned ministries have nodal responsibilities, such as drought and flood will fall under whom? Ministry of Agriculture. Epidemic and biological disasters, flood and drought, Ministry of Agriculture. Epidemic and biological disaster, Ministry of Public Health. ठीक है? Health and Family Welfare, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Then chemical disasters, under Ministry of Environment and Forest. Nuclear disaster, Ministry of Atomic Energy. Chemical, Ministry of Environment and Forest. Railway accidents, Ministry of Railway, obviously. Okay, so this is how various responsibilities have further been divided. Nodal ministries. Nuclear कौन होगा? Atomic energy. ठीक है? Biological, health and public welfare or family welfare. ठीक है? So this is how the various ministries are there. Then comes NIDM. What is the role of NIDM? सबके role के बारे में you should have some lines in your copy, right? So NIDM, its objectives are, or its aims or goals are: 1. Human resource development. Human resource development and capacity building for DM. Design, develop and implement human resource development and capacity building for DM. B. Design, develop and implement training programs. Undertake research. Assist in national policy formulation. Assist other research and training institutes. Develop educational material. Increase awareness amongst stakeholders. All right. So these are all the various functions of the NIDM. Right. Then you come to NDRF, National Disaster Response Force. It is a specialized force for disaster response under the control of NDMA. and to be deployed by the NDMA. Okay, good. So this was the structure which was legal and institutional structure which was made by NDMA. ठीक है? But this structure that was formulated, or this structure as it was envisaged. By the way, can you I want you to understand the reason why this structure is not fully implemented. I'll give you an example which will make it easier for you to understand. Once we had the Constitution of India, right? When did we have it? 19? कब हुआ था? When did we give to ourselves? 1949? कब? याद है ना? Right? So we the people of India give to ourselves. याद है? Once we gave to ourselves that constitution, at that very moment did we have all the structures and institutions envisaged in the constitution in action? हाँ? Parliament क्या था उसके पहले? Did we have a parliament before that? We had the Constituent Assembly. याद है ना? There was no parliament in the form of Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha and all the things. Okay. Did we have the Supreme Court and the High Court and the things in that order? Exactly the same order? No. Did we have the Finance Commission till that time? No. Right. So basically, though the Constitution came into action, but the structure was still not completely there. Yes or no? So even if you come up with an act where you create new institutions and organizations and things, it might take some time for those organizations and institutions to be fully active, right? Functional. You have to set them up, you have to put people under them, right? And you have to train them and do lot many things so that they become active. Then gradually, but is it that, let us say, the day we came up with the constitution, did we stop using all the previous provisions that we were using? No, we continued with the same and we gradually replaced them. Yes or no? So whatever structures were there, ठीक है ना, they were there and gradually they were replaced as the newer ones became active, right? Same happened, or same will happen here also, right? So when this act came, it envisaged that NDMA should be there, NEC should be there, this should be there, that should be there, everything should be functional. But assume whichever day this act came, within 2 months you have another major disaster. Will the new structure be in place to take action? Who will take action then? The pre-existing. इसका मतलब अब कौन action फिर से लेगा? अब कौन था? NCMC, right? NCMC will coordinate and ask the minister, sir, NDMA का तो अभी building inauguration नहीं हुआ, ribbon कल लगाया था, कटा नहीं है. NEC भी अभी आया नहीं है, NDRF के लोगों को ट्रेनिंग दे रहे हैं. ठीक है? अब डिजास्टर में किसको डिप्लॉय करें? What will the MHA say? यार जैसे पहले करते थे करते रहो, जब वो आ जाएंगे तो देख लेंगे. Yes or no? I hope you get this, right? So, how are disasters managed in the country in case of a disaster? Let us try to understand, right? That how do we practically manage disasters in the field as of now, right? What do? We do something like this for every disaster which takes place till now. Why? Because the provisions of NDM Act are still not fully functional. Okay, despite of more than 12 years having passed, we have still not been able to take or make the bodies completely functional, right? And hence, what we do, every time there is a warning for a disaster, right, the warning goes to the control room of the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is the nodal agency. Sorry, nodal ministry. Why do we go to the ministry? Because in the last 60 years, the ministry and its departments and its different bodies have created the required infrastructure. They have the machines, they have the people, they know what to do where. Right? Ministry of Home Affairs has all the required infrastructure and things. NDMA is still in the process of creating it. Okay? So, in case of a disaster, control room, उनका बना हुआ है control room. At state level and district level and national level, everywhere they have it. ठीक है, आपका CGO complex है यहाँ पे, वहाँ पे they have their control room. Okay, so every time a disaster, any disaster happens, the information goes to the control room. From the control room, the MHA coordinates with the state government. Above that, who comes into action? The National Crisis Management Committee. Okay, they also come into action and they go on to decide who is heading it. The Cabinet Secretary. Okay, so the Cabinet Secretary coordinates, decides and helps to coordinate, and then the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, whom do they deploy? वो क्या करते हैं? They inform the NDMA also कि भाई disaster आ गया है, come into action. जो जो आप कर सकते हो कर लो. ठीक है? So what do they do? NDMA calls the NDRF. ठीक है? National Disaster Response Force. How many people are there in NDRF? 12 battalions comprising of 1148 people each. ठीक है? This is the total strength of the NDRF as of now. Okay, कितने लोग हुए? हाँ? Nearly 14,000. 14,000 people distributed in the whole country. How many states we have? Right? So in 2 states we have 1,000. हाँ? SDRF अभी बताते हैं. वेट करो. पहले NDRF समझो. SDRF तक तो पहुँचे ही नहीं अभी. ठीक है? So NDRF has these many people. Where all are they deployed? That also you see. अब see here. Right? Now see this. The NDRF is deployed in all these places as of now. Okay? So you have it in Bathinda and you have it in Greater Noida. Now assume a flood comes in Uttarakashi. Okay? Kedarnath kind. The Home Ministry comes to know flood आ गया. What will they do? They will tell the unit in Bathinda and Greater Noida, flood आया हुआ है, जाना है. How much time will it take for the NDRF to go from Greater Noida to Uttarakhand? हाँ? 8-10 घंटे? 1 hour? By flight, provided you can drop. ठीक है? And if flight availability is not there, let us say there are regions where you can't drop. हाँ? तो क्या? हाँ? हाँ, चलो हेलीकॉप्टर से ले जाएंगे. अगर रोड से गया तो 7-8-10 घंटा लग गया. ठीक है ना? वो बोलेगा यार सर 10 घंटे में हम जाएंगे, 10 घंटे में वो भी इधर आ जाएंगे. So there is no point going all the way. Let us wait here itself. Once they reach, then we will save whoever can be saved. ठीक है ना? So I hope you understand the challenge here. Okay. So the ministry will say, अच्छा देखो उसके आसपास में कोई अपना है who can take action. They will say, yes sir, as he said, sir, if we send from Bathinda and Greater Noida, it might take 2 to 3 hours by flight, provided we can arrange that. But nearby there is an army camp. है ना? In India, thankfully, there is no place where you don't have an army camp in the reach of a few hundred, kilometers. हो सकता है 10-20 किलोमीटर पे आर्मी वाले बैठे हों. हाँ. And sir, last time we have also deployed the CRPF. वहाँ झगड़ा वगड़ा हो रहा था, तो वो भी वहीं बैठे हैं. है ना? So what will the ministry say? Forget the NDRF, send the army and send the CRPF. ठीक है ना, उनको भेज दो, बचा लाएंगे जितने भी बच गए. By the time NDRF will reach, the ones who had to be rescued would have been rescued. You get it? So do you understand the challenge? The challenge is we are such a big country that deploying the response force in a very timely manner becomes challenging, and you already have alternatives. So if you have alternative, you can't wait. Why? Because every minute you waste could cost you a few lives. Because rescue is the first thing that you do. NDRF does this only. They do not do rehabilitation to start with. They will go and rescue. Okay? So what does the ministry do in that case? अब वापस ministry के diagram पे आ जाओ. This one. So what will the ministry do? The ministry will ask the NDMA to deploy NDRF if they can good enough, but they will not wait for. The ministry in the meantime will deploy the CAPF and other forces. Okay? It will also talk to the NCMC. The cabinet secretary will talk to the defense secretary and he will say अगर आपका कोई cantonment है, send people. Okay? The cabinet secretary can do that, right? Because it is not under the home ministry. Home minister की बात नहीं सुनेगा defense, but cabinet की he will. ठीक है ना? So this becomes easy to coordinate. Do we get this? So the deployment of CAPF as well as NDRF, both will simultaneously take place. The other things, NDMA will coordinate through SDMA and DDMA, because the structure for NDMA is this only. NDMA can only coordinate through them, but the Ministry of Home Affairs can coordinate through nodal disaster management and relief departments of the states. They will not call the SDMA office, right? Why? Because in many states the SDMA office is still not made. Okay? At many states we still do not have a functional SDMA. Office allocation भी नहीं हुआ है कई जगहों पे. ठीक है? अब SDMA ही नहीं बना तो SDRF का क्या status होगा? You must understand yourself. Does that answer your question, dear? हाँ? SDMA ही नहीं है तो SDRF किसके अंदर आएगा? ठीक है? So SDRF भी नहीं है. ठीक है? So obviously you will not wait. So what do they do? They will call the nodal disaster management and relief department in the states, such as the revenue department, the fire department, right, the home department. They will call them. They will say, पिछले 10 साल से आप बचा रहे हो, अभी भी आप ही बचा लो. ठीक है? When SDMA will become active, then they will take action. Why are they not active? Because you will gradually understand why they are not active. Okay? But I hope you understand. So from this, now who will the nodal disaster management of the state, whom will they call? They will call the, ये देखो, fire service, the state police, ठीक है, and also other supports, right? So they can have all these support. SDMA और NDMA के पास वो नहीं है, so they will put all of these into action, and the state ministry will also call the district administration and ask them to take action. ठीक है? So the district administration will also be pushed by this. So basically what you have is that presently there are two parallel structures in case of a disaster. One, the old structure, and the other is the new gradually developing structure. ठीक है? In India we have still two simultaneous bodies or parallel bodies taking care of the disaster, the old as well as the new. समझ में आया? Now, what was the approach of the old? Relief centric. What is the approach of the new? Which is stronger in the two? आपको क्या लग रहा है? New one is stronger. Is the new one able to take care? No. Had it been able to take care, there was no need to call the old. So which is the stronger one? Huh? That's what I'm saying. तो मान लो आपके दिल में इच्छा है. For example, two of you, right? Both, one becomes an IS, you don't become an IS. Let us say, अच्छा तुम नहीं यार, वहां पे कोई है, ठीक है. So one becomes an IS, the other doesn't become an IS. One has the willingness, but he doesn't become, right? The one who become doesn't have the willingness. ठीक है. तो what what will happen to the work? काम होगा, ठीक है. जो है वो willingness नहीं है, और जिसमें willingness है उसके पास power नहीं है. I hope you get it. So what is the approach of disaster management in the country right now? Predominantly relief centric. ठीक है. Though the act envisages proactive, but in de facto, एक होता है de jure and the other is de facto. What is the de jure approach? Proactive. What is the de facto approach? Relief centric. Do you get this? This is the disaster management thing which is broadly taking place in the country. Okay, this is how we are approaching it. Now, which are the structures? So if you see national disaster management structure of India, present structure, the present structure is a overlapping structure. ठीक है. It's a overlap of the, देखो क्या क्या है इसमें, you can see for yourself. It's a overlap of the NDMA, right? Then the NIDM, National Response Force, ठीक है. Then the SDMA, SEC, then the DDMA, right? And this kind of a national disaster response and mitigation services भी नहीं है. So this is the one part. Okay. And what is the active part? You have the Cabinet Committee on Natural Calamities. ठीक है. You have the Cabinet Committee on Security, right? You also have the NCMC. ठीक है. Then you have, देखो ये रहा NCMC. Okay. Then you have the MHA, Ministries, Armed Force, Central Paramilitary, Home Guard, Civil Defense, NCC, सबको लगा देते हैं. ठीक है. ओके. लोकल अथॉरिटीज, स्टेट बॉडीज, ठीक है, स्टेट पुलिस, फायर सर्विस, वी डिप्लॉय all of them in case of a disaster. So can you see there is an overlap? दिख रहा है, right? Two parallel bodies are acting simultaneously in case of a disaster, and much of the approach is still relief centric. All right, ठीक है. So let us proceed further and try to understand why the NDMA or National Disaster Management Act 2005 has not been fully implemented. Okay, let us try to understand that. Okay, so यहाँ तक समझ में आ गया? Can I assume? So what have you written in your copy? That despite of the NDM Act being in place, despite of the NDM Act being in place since 2005, presently there is a overlapping set of structures. Overlapping set of structures which comes into action in case of a disaster. This overlap is between one, the NCMC and the MHA headed bodies, the NCMC and the MHA coordinated bodies, and two, the NDMA coordinated bodies as per the act of NCMC वाला जो लिखा है NCMC and the MHA coordinated bodies as per the provisions. There you just add this one line. The NCMC and the MHA coordinated bodies as per the provisions which existed before the NDM Act 2005. NCMC and the MHA coordinated bodies as per the provisions which existed before the NDM Act 2005. And second, the NDMA coordinated bodies as per the provisions of the NDM Act of 2005. NDM Act 2005. ठीक है? So one provision was for before and the other is after, and both of them are overlapping. Which is stronger? Still the previous approach is stronger. Why? Now let us understand. Why is the, now so the second question is, why is the NDMA not fully operational? ठीक है? Why is the NDM Act 2005 provisions not fully operational? Right? Now, see, as per this Act, NDM Act 2005, the approach is proactive, and obviously as per this approach, there are two parts to disaster management. ठीक है? What are the parts? One, mitigation, and second, response. Right? Mitigation is pre-disaster and response is post-disaster. Do we agree? Yes or no? As per the Act, we have to turn proactive, and proactive means you have to mitigate as well as respond. ठीक है? Two things. All right? Before I take you further, from your commonsensical knowledge, every time a disaster takes place, where does the money come from? Some of you said contingency fund, we have different, you have the Prime Minister Relief Fund. सुना है? Prime Minister Relief Fund से इतना दिया, यहाँ से इतना दिया. But these funds, are they specific for disasters? No, they are just funds where money is accumulated or kept, and whenever we have a contingency kind of a situation, we utilize, right? And every time you utilize or allocate that money, you have to get a sanction, approval. Bina approval ke you can't take money out of it. I hope you get this. This is one type of funds in the country. Which are the other type of fund? For example, you have the consolidated fund, right? On the consolidated fund, there are some charges which are fixed and automatically. You don't have to take approval there. है ना? Those funds are derived from it, right? Automatically. You don't have to get it approved every time. ठीक है ना? I hope we are aware of this. And where does the money come in that fund from? हाँ? कहाँ से आता है? Who allocates? Fund is allocated to that. ठीक है? So every year some money will go into that, the fixed amount of money, and out of that money, fixed amount of money is without any, condition to condition. Matlab, it's not that every time you have to take an approval, right? It is charged directly. Is that all right? So there are two types of fund. One, from where you have to get money after getting sanction, and the second, where the fund is made for the purpose of expenditure. ठीक है? है ना? दो टाइप का फंड होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल लेट अस से आपके पापा मम्मी ने आपका एक अकाउंट बना दिया एंड दे पुट 5,000 और 10,000 और 20,000 per month and they say this is for your study. They will not ask you why have you withdrawn money from that. But if your father has given you his checked signed check, right, और आप चुपचाप से उसको डाल करके 2 लाख रुपया निकाल लो, तो पापा क्या बोलेंगे? क्यों निकाला? बोलेंगे ही नहीं, आ जाएंगे, है ना, या बुला लेंगे, है ना? ठीक है, या हो सकता है बैंक मैनेजर ही पापा को फोन कर दे कि आपका बेटा ने कुछ तो घपला किया है, या बेटी ने। बेटियां थोड़ा कम घपला करती हैं, बेटे ही ये पीछे वाले ज़्यादा घपला वाले होते हैं। ठीक है, वो बहुत मुस्कुरा रहे हैं तो प्रॉबली कुछ, बट ठीक है, आई एम नॉट मतलब लुकिंग डाउन अपॉन गर्ल्स, आप भी कर सकते हो, यू हैव ऑल द फ्रीडम। ठीक है, आपको भी फुल फ्रीडम है, करो घपला। ठीक है, सो एनीवेज कमिंग बैक, व्हाट यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड हियर इज that for the response kind of the expenditure that we were doing earlier, the money was not coming from a fixed fund, it was always allocated every time there was a disaster, which means there was no already existing money which was given. ठीक है, one, right? But once you talk of mitigation, okay, like this, suppose you have to do mitigation. Now please understand what I'm trying to say here. If you have to do mitigation, will you wait for the disaster? Okay, which means the fund has to be there and the fund should have money, and from that money you do the mitigation, which means you prevent or reduce the possibility of the event and you do the next thing along with mitigation, which is preparedness. ठीक है ना? Right, preparedness. So you mitigate and prepare from this on one side, and this is independent of disaster, right? You will here not wait for the disaster to come, so you have to continuously do this expenditure, right? And response, once a disaster happens, that's when you need to take money out of your response thing. The NDM Act 2005 made two funds or made provisions for two funds, did not make. The act never makes a fund. The fund has to be made by the authority. The act will only have a provision for the fund, that this fund should be created. Okay. NDM Act also created two funds. NDMF, National Disaster Mitigation Fund, and NDRF, नेशनल डिजास्टर रिस्पॉन्स फंड। ये एनडीआरएफ उसी एनडीआरएफ के जैसा ही साउंड कर रहा है, बट देर आर टू थिंग्स, वन इज फंड, द अदर इज फोर्स। ओके, सो द एनडीएम एक्ट हैड प्रोविजंस और हैज प्रोविजंस फॉर टू फंड्स, एनडीएमएफ एंड एनडीआरएफ। ठीक है, एंड वेयर विल द मनी कम टू दीज फंड्स फ्रॉम, दैट ऑल्सो प्रोविजन इज देयर इन द act. What does it say? The Finance Commission will allocate fund to this every year, right? So the Finance Commission's allocation has to be there to this fund. What does that mean? This means that as per this act, there should be two funds, one for mitigation, one for response, and in both the funds, money will automatically be credited by the Finance Commission. Okay, now I hope all of you understand that for taking any action you always require funds. बिना पैसा का you can't take action. Yes or no? ठीक है, I'm not saying as an administrator you should take action only once you get पैसा. All I'm saying is for taking those actions also you need पैसा, right? है ना? और आप में से कुछ ये सब बहुत जल्दी समझ जाते हैं। ठीक है, सो मतलब मेरा सेंटेंस हाफ खत्म होता है और आप मुस्कुराना शुरू हो जाते हो, एज इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड द इंटेंशन. ओके, सो व्हाट इट मीन्स इज दैट फॉर एनी एक्शन यू रिक्वायर, इन द गवर्नमेंट ऑल्सो यू रिक्वायर फंड. द प्रॉब्लम इज दैट द गवर्नमेंट हैज टिल नाउ created only NDRF, right? NDMF is still not created. All right. So as per the present status, the NDMF, National Disaster Mitigation Fund, is still not created. And the NDRF is the only fund which is created. Okay. Now, if this is the status, let us say if a disaster happens, and one last thing, the NDM Act very clearly mentions that for response or from the response fund, only money should be taken for response. Right? From the response fund, money should be taken out only for response activities, not for any other activities. Similarly, from mitigation fund, money should only be taken for mitigation activity. This also they have clearly mentioned. ऐसा नहीं कि extra पैसा है तो response में से mitigation को दे देंगे, नहीं. Response का money only for response and mitigation का money only for mitigation. I hope you understand this. Now, who will suffer in this case? Mitigation. क्योंकि mitigation का money only for mitigation but fund ही नहीं बना है. ठीक है? And it cannot get the money from response fund. ठीक है? So every time we have a disaster, the NDMA allocates the money from response fund for response action. But the NDMA is not in a position to allocate money for mitigation. Why? Because the fund itself is not there. पैसा नहीं दोगे तो action कौन लेगा? Who will do prevention and preparedness activity and mitigation activity? I hope you understand. So do you understand why we are not able to take this mitigation set of activities? Right? So what will be the status of mitigation in disaster management? Almost non-existent. Which means that in India, despite of all this, we are still not able to take mitigation activities, or they are almost non-existent. Why? Because the fund needed for that is itself not created. Alright? Now, but does that mean that we do not take any mitigation activity? We do, but that is mostly from other funds. For example, Chief Minister might give some fund. In his state, he realizes, for example, in Odisha, right? The government realizes we cannot wait for the center to take mitigation action, so we need to allocate our own funds. Right? They might allocate fund, they might prepare themselves. This is what they did before file-in, because of which they were well prepared when the file-in came. But in Uttarakhand, the Chief Minister could not allocate and the disaster turned bad. Okay? Both the disasters came in the same year. Right? But one of them, because of state's activity, was better. The other, because of state's lack, did not happen. I hope you get this. Simple logic. So do you understand why, despite of NDM Act, we are not able to mitigate? And hence, our mostly the approach becomes relief centric in case of a disaster. We do take some action, but it's not major. So one is on the front of the funds. I hope you understand the funding issue. Is this clear to most of you? What is the challenge in disaster funding in India or in mitigation funding in India? The challenge is this. At the state level, none of these funds are there. जब सेंटर पे ही सिर्फ रिस्पॉन्स फंड है तो स्टेट पे तो वैसा ही नहीं है. क्यों? क्योंकि स्टेट पे एसडीएम में ही नहीं है. I told you, not in all, but in some states you don't have SDMA itself. For example, in Goa, in Manipur, right? In many states you don't have SDMA itself. Arunachal Pradesh. So if you don't have SDMA, obviously, fund kisko doge? I hope you get. So these are some of the major challenges. One, in terms of the fund. The second challenge is in terms of, एक तो पैसा नहीं है. Second क्या है challenge? The second has to be personal. Do we have personal? We just saw the challenge of personal. NDRF is capable or trained, but it is not sufficient. The number of personnel in the NDRF are not sufficient. Though they are highly trained, they are the most trained disaster response force in the world. Right? That has been acclaimed for them from different countries also. For example, in 2011, during the Fukushima disaster, NDRF was sent to Japan. Our response force was the only international response force which acted there. And the Japanese authorities also applauded that your response force is trained. But the challenge is that you have very few in number. 10, 11, 12,000 लोग हैं, right? That too deployed at very few places. I hope you get this. So this is the second challenge, that the number of personals is less. ठीक है? So these are some of the major challenges. And what are the other challenges? You will over a period gradually understand once I talk about the other things. Okay. So are we clear about this much? Pakka? I hope you understand what is the status of the. We'll come to the current status in a while, where I'll take up the committee, what are the suggestions of the committee and what are the observations, right? But before we do that, let us come to what are the other aspects important with respect to disaster management, right? So I would like you to write down our disaster profile, national disaster profile, right? What is the national disaster profile in India in terms of disasters? Disaster profile का क्या मतलब है? Which are the disasters that the country faces? So first it is the Indian subcontinent itself is the Indian subcontinent itself is one of the most disaster prone regions in the world. One of the most disaster prone regions in the world. And nearly 85% of the region, 85% of the area of the country is vulnerable to one or multiple hazards. Okay. In terms of number, 22 states and union territories are disaster prone. Now, in terms of disasters, let us write down one by one. For earthquake, just some broad crisp data. We won't get into too much detail, right? Earthquake, nearly 12% region prone to very severe earthquake, 12% to very severe, 18% to severe earthquakes, and 25% to damageable earthquakes. So 55% of the area is earthquake prone. Okay. Then with respect to floods, nearly 30 million people are affected annually. With 12% land prone to floods, 12% prone to flood, 12% land prone to flood, and the following states, the following five states, Assam, Bihar, Odisha, UP and WB. UP and WB mainly in the Indo-Gangetic Brahmaputra plains. Mainly in the Indo-Gangetic Brahmaputra plains have flood as annual feature. Okay, then recently, due to climate change, even regions in Rajasthan and other non-flood prone areas, even regions in Rajasthan and other non-flood prone areas are facing this challenge. Okay, all this data that I'm sharing with you comes from the NDMA website, right? Through their various documents, policy, plan, सबके अंदर उन्होंने ये सब डाला हुआ है, right? So I'm just consolidating that and giving it to you at one place. Third, droughts. So nearly 50 million people are affected annually. Five zero million are affected annually, and one third of the country receives low rainfall. How much is low? Less than 75 centimeters. Less than 75, making such region drought prone. Then cyclones. So about 8% of land is vulnerable to cyclones. Right? Vulnerable to cyclones, where the coastal areas are affected by two to three tropical cyclones every year. Right? And the eastern coast is more affected. Eastern coast is more affected. Also from storm surges. Storm surges. Right? Which is accentuated or made worse. Accentuated or made worse by accentuated or made worse by low depth ocean bed topography, low depth ocean bed topography and coastal configuration. Low depth ocean bed topography and coastal configuration of the Indian coasts. ठीक है? Then landslides. They occur in the Himalayas, northeast, as well as the eastern and the western Ghats. Mainly due to earthquake prone regions, eastern and the western Ghat, mainly due to earthquake prone regions, heavy rainfall during monsoon, and steep slopes and steeper slopes in the region. Right? In addition to this, even cold waves and heat waves, affect major part of the country during the respective winter and summer conditions. Every year you read this news, right? That because of cold waves, so many people have died in the northern plains, or because of heat waves, so many people have died in the northern plains or in the central part of the country. Okay? So cold and heat waves also affect. Then add even avalanches, right? Avalanches have become a regular disaster. Avalanches have become a regular disaster, mainly in Jammu and Kashmir or in the western Himalayan regions. Okay, so this is our disaster proneness of the country. To what level? Yes, dear.
So we cannot associate droughts only with the scarcity of rainfall. There's many other factors.
It has, but drought is, as per NDMA, it is considered as one of the disasters. The causes can be anthropogenic as well as natural, both.
So what do you need to mention here? Only the
Natural hair, right? But in the end, you will also write, when you are writing an answer on droughts, you have to mention that there are also mismanagement of the monsoon and all this. Okay? So which have to be mentioned. All right. So from this, let us come to the next part of the story, which is about how is अभी तक हमने क्या क्या समझा? So what is the structure, right? And the fund, right? Now the next is how do we coordinate disasters, right? How do we coordinate during disasters, or what is the structure for coordination during disaster in the country? Coordination networks or coordination structure for disaster in the country. We call it as resource coordination networks. Right? What does this mean? By the way, why is coordination required during disaster? Huh? Because you always have limited availability of various things which you require during disaster, right? And if you do not coordinate properly, you might have overlapping or wastage, right? Or non-availability, right? So there is a need for coordination. So what are the coordination networks that we have? Let us see. Right? One by one, we go on writing about them. The first is IDRN. IDRN, which is India Disaster Resource Network. IDRN or the India Disaster resource network which is a nationwide electronic inventory nationwide electronic inventory for resources such as equipment and human resource available at the different district, state and national level. Available at the different district, state and national level government bodies. ठीक है, so what does this give you? Available at the district, state and national level government bodies. क्या मिलेगा इसमें? For example, if you require some machine, some equipment, some tools, some people, so where will the government search? They will search it on the IDRN, right? They will go and see which district what is available. Okay, suppose you require 10 ambulance, so your district might not have it, so you will check it on the IDRN. Does the district next to me have it? Does the state have it? If they have, you can get it. You can tell that please send it because we require. So this is, I'm just one example. So this is one kind of a thing, right? Then the second resource coordination network is your IDKN. IDKN. This is under the SARC. IDKN under SARC. The full form is India Disaster Knowledge Network. India Disaster Knowledge Network. Providing various resources and services. Various resources and services such as knowledge collaborations, networking, maps, emergency contact information, and other valuable information for disasters. Then we have the CDRN. CDRN. Corporate Disaster Resource Network. Corporate Disaster Resource Network. What will this do? क्या लगता है क्या करना चाहिए? अच्छा चलो, let us think. Let us say a disaster takes place in any part of the country, okay? But it's a big disaster, national level. So what will the corporates do in such disaster? They will try to take some responsibility. They will say, okay, we will provide this. For example, the Tatas or the Infosys or any company for that matter might say that we would like to donate or do something. Okay, but let us say that a disaster comes in Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, assume an earthquake comes. Okay, and everyone in all the CEOs sitting in their rooms, respective rooms, might think, यार बहुत ठंड पड़ी है. Let us sell kambal, blankets, and let us say there are 1 lakh people, right? And 200 companies decide to send 20,000 or 30,000 blankets each. तो कितने ब्लैंकेट हो जाएंगे? समझ में आया? आपने भर दिया ब्लैंकेट से, राइट? बाकी चीजें भूल गए, right? So you require a network where the administration can put that we will be requiring this, right? Not available with us. What can the corporates do? They can go and pick, okay, we will give this, we will give this, and this way all the requirements could be taken care of. Yes or no? So this becomes a listing site where the government or the administration or the authorities or even NGOs can put the requirement and the corporates can fill it up depending on their capacity. Do we get? And you will also come to know that okay, this somebody else is giving, so I should not duplicate, I should look for something other. Okay, this is what this corporate resource coordination network does. All right, so you can write about it that it is a web-based supply chain management system. It's a web-based supply chain management system helping the relief agencies, or rather right, helping the relief, comma, response, comma, local agencies, helping the relief, response and local agencies access and feed in real time information on products and services required, information on products and services required during the relief activities, during rescue and relief activities. Okay, then we have the NDCN, National Disaster Communication Network. National Disaster Communication Network. Okay, now before I tell you about this, tell me that whenever a major disaster comes, such as cyclone, earthquake, or something, what will happen to the normal communication networks? What are the normal communication networks based on? For example, mobile or wired. What are they based on? They are based on pillars, right? Or they are based on the wired networks. But during a disaster, it is very much possible that the towers might collapse, the wired networks might go down, right? And let us say you are a DM, right? All of a sudden you are sitting in the district headquarter and earthquake comes. Okay, what will you do? You might take up the phone and find that it is dead. You might take up the mobile and find that it is also dead. ठीक है, अब क्या करोगे? चिट्ठी लिखोगे, है ना? पोस्टमैन, हाँ, पता चला पोस्टमैन इज बरीड अंडर द पोस्ट ऑफिस. ठीक है, अब क्या करोगे? कबूतर उड़ाएंगे. सर कबूतर पकड़ेंगे, पैर में बांधेंगे, ठीक है, गुड, ठीक है. बट जो आपके जैसा एनवायरमेंट फ्रेंडली नहीं है, ठीक है, और हिस्टोरिकल नॉलेज लैकिंग है और कबूतरों को ट्रेन नहीं किया है जिन्होंने, वो क्या करेंगे बेचारे, राइट? सो दिस इज वेयर दिस नेटवर्क कम्स हैंडी. ओके, सो लेट अस राइट अबाउट इट. ठीक है, सो during a disaster, the terrestrial communication networks generally fail or are prone to fail. The terrestrial communication networks are prone to fail, and hence the NDMA set up the NDCN. as a network of networks. This provides connectivity. This provides connectivity to existing networks, to existing networks through NICNet, through NICNet. बोर्ड पे देखो, NICNet, 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 SWAN, Statewide Area Network. NICNet, the full form you need to pick up, National Information something Network, okay, and National Information and Communication Network, something like this it is, okay, and SWAN is Statewide Area Network, then Polnet, VSAT, right? VSAT technology is even used in your distance learning programs, satellite based this thing, right? This is a satellite based technology, okay? So most of these you will find are either satellite based or a hub based, which is a mobile hub, right? These are either mobile hub based. So the mobile hub might be moved to that region and that might release the communication signals. In case of a normal signal, normal tower might have collapsed. So they will move these vehicles, they will go and they will be releasing that, or they will be based on satellite. These are the only two methods which are possible. All right. So this is the other this thing, right? IDRN we have already done, right? So this is it. These are the various coordination networks that we utilize. All right. Now, from this we come to the early warning systems, right? Early warning systems used for disaster management. So what are the early warning systems that we use? Where have we mentioned about early warning systems? Not only monsoon. आज ही हमने कितनी जगह पे किया है? In all those Hyogo, देखो, in most of them ID, NDR, सब में है early warning system, right? So, what are the, first of all, theoretically, what is the early warning system mainly comprising of, or what are the elements of early warning system, right? What is the early warning system supposed to do? So you can draw this very simple diagram. The first thing that an early warning system does is sensing of precursor. Sensing of the precursor. So it will just sense. This is the first thing. What are the elements of or components of an early warning system? Components of EWS. The first is sensing of the precursor. After this, the second thing that EWS does is transmission of data. Transmission of data. The third is processing the data. Processing data and creating or putting an alert. Or finalizing alert, I should say, not putting, but picking or choosing alert. What does this mean? What is the level of the hazard? मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि साइक्लोन आया छोटा सा और आपने पूरा डिस्ट्रिक्ट हिला दिया, right? You have to tell what is the level of the, right? So accordingly it has to pick the right alert also, right? That in the next 3 hours these regions will be affected and this is the level of wind, so you should go inside your home. Don't tell कि हाँ भैया cyclone is coming, please evacuate the district, because that might create another hazard or havoc. So your alert has to be of a, a required level, right, or commensurate to the disaster. Okay, so this is the third thing. Process the data and choose the alert, and finally, once it has chosen the right alert, then it has to disseminate the alert. Disseminate alert matlab it should ensure that the alert reaches the regions where it is intended to reach, and in the language that it is intended to, so that it informs the right set of people in the most optimal manner. Disseminate the alert, inform the community in the optimal manner. Okay, so this is what a good early warning system is supposed to do. Which are the various early warning systems that we deploy? Let us come to them directly. Okay, so early warning systems deployed. One for cyclone. Which are the early warning systems? One is the radio sonde stations. Radio sonde stations. Right, we use the word radio sonde stations, SONDE, right, which release weather balloons. Weather balloons for measuring the various parameters. Then the second is the radars, such as S-band radar and Doppler S-band radar. Okay. Then we have satellite-based cyclone warning dissemination system. Satellite-based cyclone warning dissemination system. Okay, and then there are also the area cyclone warning centers of the IMD. Area cyclone warning centers of the IMD, which are directly linked to the INSAT, right? Which are directly linked to the INSAT, Indian National Satellite. Right? Then floods, with respect to flood, we mostly have flood forecasting centers. There are no machines which help you with this, right? You see the water level and based on that we forecast. So with respect to flood, the Central Water Commission has many flood forecasting centers. Central Water Commission has many flood forecasting centers, which use stream flow measurement stations, and rain gauges. Stream flow measurement stations and rain gauges, along with or connected by wireless networks. Right, and also the FMO, flood meteorological offices of the IMD. Flood meteorological offices of the IMD. Okay, lastly in this you write, even the National Remote Sensing Authority, Hyderabad, National Remote Sensing Authority, Hyderabad, monitors major floods. Monitors major floods. Then, with respect to tsunami, we have the shore-based tide gauges, shore-based tidal gauges, then pressure sensors on ocean bottom, then third, deep ocean assessment and reporting of tsunami. Right, it is also called as the DART, D-A-R-T. Right? All right. Then, so you have these mainly either shore-based or pressure sensors, right? Or you have the deep ocean buoys. Deep ocean buoys, which float. Buoy means buoyancy. This is based on buoyancy. So these are balls or equipments which float in the water in deep ocean, where they sense the movement of the ocean, and based on that they project the this thing, right? We also have various tsunami warning centers, such as the हमने लिखा है tsunami के केस में, लिखा था ना, पैसिफिक, अलास्का, इंडियन ओशन, वो तीनों हैं, ठीक है? And the information is collected by the Encois Hyderabad center, from where it is disseminated other ways, right? So these are some of the major things with respect to early warning systems. Some other common devices used in early warning include automatic position reporting systems. Some other devices used in early warning include automatic position reporting systems, community radios, automatic position reporting system, community radios, GIS systems, community radio or ham radio. We also call it as ham, HAM, community radio or ham radio. Then GIS and other wireless communication systems. Okay, so what will the ham radio do in case of a disaster, or a community radio? What these people do is that these are mostly community radio operators. What they do, whenever a disaster takes place, they will go to such place and figure out or find a affected community, for example a village or any set of people. From there they will tune their what you call as emitting devices, emitters, radio frequency emitters, right? And from there they make announcement that at this location, this place, these many people are stuck and they require this kind of assistance, right? And the administration goes on to tune to the radio stations, right? They will set people who will continuously tune, and once they get any new frequency, they will try to listen to whatever is being telecast, and based on that they will send the help. So this way you tell to the administration and others that at this place how much of help is required or how many people are stuck, something like this. These practices have become very helpful. For example, during the tsunami of 2004, many community radio operators from across India went to Tamil Nadu, and they helped the local people as well as the administration, which was also recognized. So this is how community radio becomes helpful. Okay, community radio is, by the way, a technology by which you create a localized radio channel, right? And your universities, the ones who are from various universities know this, and universities and colleges also, we had this, facility of creating localized community radios. Okay. So this is it in terms of early warning systems. All right. Now, from there, let us come to the last part of the story, right? Which is what is the role of a district magistrate during a, not last, this is the second last, then we'll come to the last part. The role of district magistrate during a disaster. So these are aspects given in your report on crisis management by ARC2 and some other papers where they have given these are the roles of a DM during a disaster. Right? Just write them, and when creating any answer you can utilize. Right? They include first engagement and coordination. Engagement and coordination with state and central level institutions. Engagement and coordination with state and central level institutions. Second, proper understanding of DM policy and plan. Third, proper understanding of standard operational procedures. Proper understanding of DM policy and plan. Third, proper understanding of standard operational procedures. Also called as SOPs. Standard operational procedures or SOPs. What does this mean? What are you supposed to do in case of a disaster? This is standard operational procedure. So you should already know in advance. उस समय ऐसा नहीं है कि आप, once a disaster come, then you ask your office assistant, please go and get the plan and policy and the SOP. उतना पढ़ने का टाइम ही नहीं होगा. हो सकता है वो documents accessible ना रहें, है ना? So you should know it in advance. पता चला earthquake आया, मशीन वो अलमारी डूब गया, ठीक है? So you won't get the document. अब किधर से मिलेगा SOP? So you should know all these in advance. Okay. Then next is sensitization of stakeholders. Sensitization of stakeholders. Next, disaster preparedness. Disaster preparedness in terms of the following. 1. Creating rescue shelters. Public awareness messages. Community mobilization and engagement. Community mobilization and engagement. Effective EWS. Effective and redundant communication systems. Effective and redundant. Redundant matlab, for everything you should have two options, right? You shouldn't depend only on one. Effective and redundant matlab you should always have two options, right? Communication systems. Then proper response mechanism. Proper response mechanism. And finally, mock drills and exercises. Mock drills and exercises. Okay, so these are the things. Now, which are the policies, plans which you have to know? By the way, what is the difference between policy, plan, and guidelines?
Policy is a big, broader document than the
Hmm.
plan.
Okay.
Plan is a specific document to achieve a specific goal. Then guidelines are you can say the basically the rules, the set of rules that they have to follow while achieving that plan and goal.
Very good. Right. So policy is what you want to do, right, or what you aspire to achieve. Plan is how do you intend to get it, right? And guideline is how do you do it. Do you get it? So policy is the broader thing, right? That this is what we intend to attain. Plan, it gives you how will you or who will do what. Right? Plan gives you who will do what in achieving that. Right? And guideline is for the who. How will that person achieve it? That is the guidelines. Okay? For example, we say that we will make India disaster free. That is the policy. Simple. Who will do it? We will involve the administration, the government, the community, the corporates, everyone. So this is the plan. What is the guideline? What will the corporate do? What will the government do? What will the community do? This is the guideline. Do we get it? So first you have to make the policy, then you have to make the plan, and then you have to make the guidelines. Very good. Now, what happened in our case? 2005 the plan came, the act came. 2007 our first guideline came. Okay? And till now we have come up with nearly 22 guidelines. Right? Then we realized that we are coming up with guidelines without policy. Okay? So in 2009 they came up with policy. Okay? Then we realized that we have come up with nearly 15, more than 15 guidelines without plan. And hence in 2016 we came up with the plan. Okay? So the chronology goes that the policy came in 2009 by the name of National Policy on Disaster Management. We call it as NPDM. Right? Then we came up with the plan. This came up in 2016. We call it as the NDMP. Okay? And then we came up with, or not then, but simultaneously we came up with guidelines, more than 20 in number. 22 or so guidelines, right, which are there, right? Now, which are the guidelines that have come out amongst those 20? The list is long, right? I can give you some in the chronology in which they came, right? दो चार का नाम लिख लो, not all, right? And just one second. Yeah. So the oldest of these policies that we came up, guidelines that we came up, came in 2007, right? Which was the chemical disaster guidelines, followed by guidelines for states in the same year, and earthquake. 2007, chemical disaster, earthquake, and guidelines for states. Then in 2008, for cyclones and biological disasters. Cyclone, biological disaster, floods. Then 2009, landslides and snow avalanches. Landslides, snow avalanches, and chemical terrorism. (2010) drought. This they have asked. Okay, the question, I think 2014 ka question was on drought. I showed you yesterday, right? So 2010 drought. All right. Then 2014 we came for seismo retrofitting. सीज्मो रेट्रोफिटिंग 2010 में दो और थे, सुनामी एंड अर्बन फ्लडिंग. 2010 सुनामी एंड अर्बन फ्लडिंग ऑल्सो. 2014 seismic retrofitting and 2016 heat waves. Okay. So ये सारे guidelines the NDMA has already published. Out of all these, UPSC has asked you on urban floods, droughts, earthquakes. You highlight the ones where they have asked you questions. Drought, we have seen those questions yesterday. कल देखा था ना? I showed you those questions yesterday. See here, urban flood they have asked, right? Then they have asked you on cloudburst. Then they have asked you on earthquakes, droughts. Okay? So these they have asked you. Remaining are still pending. This year also they will ask one, probably. Let us see whichever one or whatever they ask. I'm expecting they might ask you a question this year on the disaster management plan itself. Right? If they don't ask on the plan, then they might ask about any disaster or the Sendai framework and related things. So let us see what they ask. And the others you have to prepare slightly. Okay? Where do you get it from? I showed you yesterday, there is no point reading the guidelines. Right? Because reading the guideline also doesn't take you anywhere. What you have to know, what is your preparedness and other aspects, and slightly focus on that disaster. If you know the disaster and you know the preparedness and vulnerability and other things, you should be able to broadly answer. Is that all right? Right. So from here we come to the some of the current effects, current aspects of disaster management. Okay, current in the sense of some committees which were formed and what did they suggest. Okay, observations and suggestions of some recent committees. Right. So one of the committees was set up in April 2013. The CAG, not set up, it came up with the report. The CAG committee or the CAG came up with his report in 2013. CAG came up with his report in 2013, where he made the following observations. Following observations. 1. The plan still not there. The plan still not formulated. Guidelines not binding. Guidelines not binding. No major project completed by NDMA. NDMF still not created. Critical equipments such as satellite phones not available at districts. Critical equipments such as satellite phones not available at all district centers. Shortage of trained manpower. Shortage of trained manpower in infrastructure and equipment. Shortage of manpower, infrastructure and equipment. And finally, SOP for deployment of NDRF. SOP, Standard Operating Procedure, for deployment of NDRF still not finalized. Right, so what did it suggest? Obviously, for all of them, they suggested that you do them, such as create the NDMF at all the levels, right? Add more manpower, create the infrastructure, provide the critical equipment. वही सब कुछ है, ठीक है? So this is what they suggested. All right. Then you come to the second body, the task force. Task force under, or we call it as the PK Mishra Task Force. PK Mishra. P for PK Mishra Task Force. Right? On disaster preparedness. So what did he observe? He observed that NDMA failing to achieve its objectives. NDMA failing to achieve its objectives and needs to be redesigned. ये इसका suggestion था, that also we are writing here itself, and needs to be redesigned. Second, need for more financial allocation. Need for allocation of more financial allocation to mitigation. Right? Then it applauded the functioning of NDR force. Applauded functioning of NDR force, NDRF. Criticized the NEC for not having met for years at stretch. And recommended its complete dissolution. ठीक है? Not having met for years and recommended its complete dissolution. उन्होंने बोला ये बेकार बॉडी है, no need. ठीक है? So dissolve it. Next, criticized various ministries as well as NIDM for not fulfilling the state and UT's expectations. The ministries and the NIDM for not fulfilling the state and UT's expectation in terms of research and other help, training, research, etc. Also criticized the states for not having a functional SDRF, SDMA. Also criticized the states for not having functional SDMA. Right? And finally said that the Gujarat disaster management model is superior than the NDM Act and should be replicated. He said that the Gujarat model is good and the Act of Gujarat is good and that should be replicated. Within bracket, for your personal knowledge, he was a IAS officer of Gujarat cadre. ठीक है? So that gives you a hint of, right, क्यों उनके लिए Gujarat model was good. And once the new government came, he also became the chief guest at the NDMA Foundation Day, right? So, but all this you don't have to write in your answer. ठीक है? Then following some of the recommendations, the government has talked of restructuring the NDMA. It has downgraded the vice chairman's position and other things. So it has talked of restructuring the NDMA. Talked of improving the communication networks. For example, the Home Minister himself during the Jammu Kashmir flood said that we need to strengthen the communication network, and has also added 2 more battalions to NDRF. Right? Then in recent times, the security forces have also been involved in various exercises or mock drills and exercises for disaster management. Based on the NDMP 2016 guidelines. Based on the NDMP 2016 guidelines, such as Operation Jal Rahat, Operation Prakampana, just to name a few, which you can write in your answers if you need. And Operation Sahayata. Also in August 2016, Sahayata. Also in 2016, NDMA recognized the Mumbai as role model in disaster management. The Mumbai model. This was August 2016. NDMA, not Mr. Mishra, but this time NDMA recognized the Mumbai model as a role model for disaster management. Right? This was in the Hindu newspaper. And recently the BRICS have also moved forward to the BRICS nations have also moved forward to implement this was again in August 2016 only. It was a news in the paper that the BRICS nations have also moved forward to have a joint action plan. Joint action plan and a joint task force for DM. Joint action plan and joint task force. Then in January 2017, there was a applaud of the Bhuj model of reconstruction. The Bhuj model of reconstruction post disaster. Following the build back better approach. Bhuj model of reconstruction after a disaster, following the build back better approach. टाइम अप, थैंक यू, लिखना नहीं है, ठीक है. सो विद दैट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट कम्स टू एन एंड. वो भी लिख लिया, राइट. सो that's it. With this we come to the end of disaster management and geography part, right? So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.